Diksha, I think we can start.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's program hosted by Chamber for Advancement of Small and Medium Businesses. I would request everyone to mute yourself, and if you have any question, please put it in the chat box. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. Now, I would like to call upon our President, Mr. Nilesh Lele, sir, to give a brief overview of today's session and also introduce today's speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diksha. Just one second. First and foremost, warm welcome to our today's speaker, Dr. Nagendran, who we heard and met last week as well. Last week he spoke more on applications of palm oil in the food industry. Today we're going to hear from him in other industries as well. So before I introduce him as well as introduce him and hand it over to him, I would like to give, as always, a brief overview. I guess most of you must have already heard me before, so I'll keep it short. The other thing is all our past webinars are online on our YouTube channel, where you can see here at the bottom, and I've also put it on the chat box just now. So feel free to visit our YouTube channel, all our social media sites, as well as our website to find the event PPTs as well as our the recordings of the webinars. As most of you must be familiar, the chamber is based out of Mumbai, and our aim is basically to help grow the small and medium businesses. So I'm not going to keep repeating our mission, vision, and the why the chamber was formed. Hopefully, most of you must have seen my presentation before. I would like to acknowledge our team. It's a very strong team. We are hardly 17 days old, and we already have a very strong advisory board team as well as a management team from various walks of industry, as well as people with finance background, people with sales marketing background, with startup background. So we are trying to bring the whole ecosystem together through our management team that we have here. Some of the initiatives that we have had in the month of March, since we launched on the 1st of March, is entrepreneur. We are trying to bring successful entrepreneurs, hear their stories, which of course motivates us. On the upcoming Monday, we have Lalit Maheshwari sir, a veteran in the field of dehydration, who will talk about his success story. Next week in the technology transfer, we'll have Dr. Gautam from BRC, who will talk about different technologies available at the BRC food department. Next Wednesday, we will have Padma Bhushan Professor J.B. Joshi talk about various aspects, especially with regards to valorization of food produce. And tomorrow, we have someone from ICICI Bank, where ICICI Bank also has a lot of initiatives for the startups. So it would be fascinating to hear to him tomorrow. And most likely next Thursday, we will have an investor who invests in startups all the way up to 5 crore kind of ticket size. Shortly, we will be launching our 4 other marquee programs. One will be our investor platform, or like an investor and a startup meet kind of a thing. We'll also have our buyer seller meet announced shortly. We're also coming up with a concept called Startup Buddy, where you will be able to tap into resources and expertise of different service providers, whether they are from compliance, ISO, or CAs or CAS, legal. So all those are also service providers we want to bring on board, who will provide startup buddy kind of services. We plan to have our launch of our incubation cell. In fact, the Kolhapur one is almost final. So hopefully in the month of April, we are targeting April 13th, which is the Gudi Padwa, the start of New Year as per the Marathi calendar. So we are hoping to have our launch of our incubation center in Kolhapur. And just keep an eye, look out for different activities of the chamber through our social media sites and through WhatsApp and all that. You'll be hearing from us as well. I'm not going to go through this list, which most of you have already attended these programs, and hopefully you'll attend the upcoming programs as well. Though I want to talk about the benefits, like I said, the Startup Buddy is something that will actually help a lot of startups scale up and take their startups to the next level. We plan to have buyer seller meets, as well as we plan to have startup meets, so that the startups can help each other. Sometimes there could be synergies between two startups as well. Investor network is something that I'm personally very passionate and will be directly involved in trying to get a lot of different types of investors, whether they're high net worth individuals or PEs or VCs, where a lot of our startups can actually, startups and SMEs can benefit out of it. We'll also be launching an industry defined problem where many companies have certain problems which they are not able to solve. So at a very minuscule cost, we will be able to, we'll have this competition where different students or even professionals can submit their ideas and hopefully help the startups solve whatever problems that they're facing. We have been approached to partner with Informa Markets for their seminar, for their exhibition in May in Bangalore. So please look out for our stall there in May. We are also being asked by different government agencies to run different EDP, entrepreneurship development program, for their their startups or their customers. So look out for those announcements shortly. And like I always say, our chamber office in BKC is available for your team meetings or your client meetings. So we are also trying to keep the membership at minimum. We know that our operational cost will also not be covered through this, but that's not our agenda. So most of our members will most likely fall in the micro category with a turnover up to 5 crore, and it's hardly 2,500 rupee fees per year to become a member of our chamber. So with this, I thank you all for all the support. In fact, we have had more than 700 people attend our lectures and the webinars in last 2.5 weeks. So we are very overwhelmed. We had a great response even yesterday, where NIFTEM displayed their technologies, and so we look forward to the support and participation of all the people that have been with us in last 2.5 weeks. So with this, I take the privilege and I'm very honored to introduce our esteemed speaker today. We heard him last week as well. And as I said, his talk is on our YouTube channel. So if you have missed anything, feel free to visit our YouTube channel to see the talk from last week. So Dr. Nagendran has a bachelor's degree in food science and technology and a master's degree in industrial technology, food technology, from the University of Science, Malaysia. He obtained a diploma in public management from the National Institute of Public Administration in Malaysia and a PhD in nutrition from University of Sydney, Australia. Dr. Nagendran's specific areas of research interest are food applications of palm oil, lipid metabolism, and the physiological effects of polyphenols. Dr. Nagendran began his working career as an officer in the Malaysian Administrative and Diplomatic Services in 1989 and joined the Malaysian Palm Oil Board in 1995. He served as MPOB Regional Manager Europe, based at the Embassy of Malaysia in Belgium and Mission of Malaysia to the European Union in Brussels from January 2009 to December 2012. He was then head of MPOB's nutrition unit from March 2013 to October 2015. Since 1st November 2015, Dr. Nagendran has been MPOB Regional Manager, South Asia, and I think he spent almost 3 years in India based out of Mumbai. Dr. Nagendran has extensive experience in the development of international food standards and has been a member of the Malaysian delegation to the Codex in Rome as well as Geneva. He has also been active in meetings of the Codex Committee on General Principles, the Codex Committee on Nutrition and Food for Special Dietary Uses, and the Codex Committee on Fats and Oils. He has also been a member of the Malaysian delegation to meetings of the International Maritime Organizations. So we have an esteemed speaker here, and I would again like to welcome Dr. Nagendran and would request him to take over from here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nilesh Lele. and a very, very good evening to all present today. I would like to thank Mr. Lede for extending me this invitation and also for giving me an opportunity to meet you all again. I can see some names here on the screen. I think they joined last week's program where I spoke about the food applications of palm oil. Today, I'll be moving on to something very different. I will be talking actually about the other part of the story. I'll be talking about the non-food applications of oil palm products. So the objective today, ladies and gentlemen, is to give you an overview of these applications or the non-food applications of oil palm products. What I would like to do in the next few minutes would be to, first of all, I would begin by introducing you to the world of oils and fats. Then I would specifically talk about palm and palm kernel oils. Then we'll deliberate on non-food applications of oil palm products. Okay. And then, of course, we'll come to a conclusion. So what we have here is a global picture, a global image of what they call the oil or the world of oils and fats. Basically, when we talk about the world of oils and fats, I'm not referring here to the petroleum component. I'm actually looking at basically the vegetable oils as well as animal fats. There are actually 17 major oils and fats that are produced and traded. Of these, palm oil, soybean oil, mustard or rapeseed oil, and sunflower oil are considered the big four. In total, these oils actually account for about 75% of these 17 oils and fats. Then we have got other oils here, for example, palm kernel oil, which is actually also from the oil palm crop, coconut oil, cottonseed oil, and groundnut oil. These are considered another group of oils which also contribute significant amount to the world production and trade. Then we have oils such as olive oil, sesame seed oil, corn oil, linseed oil, and castor oil. In addition to these oils sourced from crops or oils that are called vegetable oils, we have got a group of fats originating from animals. These are butter, fish oil, lard, and tallow. So this is the entire picture of the 17 major oils and fats. Currently, we have data that has been published by this source called Oil World. It's based in Germany. The data for the year 2020, the calendar year 2020, is for 8 major oils. So the data here shows the production and the export of palm oil, soybean oil, mustard or rapeseed oil, and sunflower oil, as well as cottonseed, groundnut, palm kernel, and coconut oils. So on one side of the slide, you have got the production on the left side. The production of these 8 major oils in 2020 was about 197 million tons. Palm oil accounted for about 73.8 million tons or 37.4%. Next came soybean oil at 57.98 tons, almost 30%. Rapeseed and mustard oil, 25.27 tons, 12.8%. Sunflower oil contributed close to 11%, that is about 21.36%. The others here, comprising cottonseed, groundnut, palm kernel, and coconut oil, accounted for about just under 10% at 18.89 million tons. When we look at the export, here we see that palm oil is a major oil in the export market. contributing 57.4% of exports and about 50.6 million tons. Soybean oil came next, about 12.6 million tons, and that was 14%, followed by sunflower oil, 13.4 million tons, that accounted for 15.2%, and then mustard oil at 5.8 tons, billion tons, sorry, 5.8 million tons at 6.65%. Sorry, at 5.81%. The others here accounted for 5.8 million tons. So what we can see here is a predominance of palm oil both in export as well as production of these 8 major oils. So one would wonder, why is this so? The main reason that this happens is because palm oil is very productive. The oil palm tree produces about 3.5 tons of oil per hectare per year. And this is far higher than what is produced by either sunflower oil or rapeseed oil, which is less than 0.8 tons per hectare per year, and soybean oil, or the soybean crop, which produces just under 0.5 tons per hectare per year. So because oil palm is a very productive crop, it actually accounts for a large proportion of the world oils and fats production. Here, I'm trying to show you data for the major producers and exporters of palm oil. In 2020, a total of 73.8 million tons palm oil were produced. Indonesia accounted for 57% of production, Malaysia for 26%, and others for about 17%. And these others includes countries from Africa, from South America, as well as countries like Thailand and Papua New Guinea. Similarly, when we look at major exporters, a total of 50.6 million tons of palm oil were exported in 2020. Indonesia accounted again for a large proportion of the exports, 50.4%. Malaysia at 34% came second, and the others, as I mentioned, the African countries and the South American countries, as well as some countries in the Asia Pacific, accounted for the balance of the 12%. So this is the scenario of the production and export of palm oil in 2020. Now, the major consuming countries, a total of 75.2 billion tons of palm oil were consumed, both for edible and non-edible uses. And the major consumers, Indonesia accounted for 20% of this consumption. India and the EU accounted for 11% each. China was 9%. Malaysia herself consumed about 5% of the palm oil produced in 2020. The other consumers, Pakistan and Nigeria, at 3% and 4% respectively, and globally, the others here, 37%. Let me also mention here that palm oil is actually consumed or imported by almost 160 countries worldwide. So it is an oil that goes to almost the entire world. Where does the palm oil or even the palm kernel oil come from? The oil palm is a plantation crop. So what we have here, this here is the oil palm plantation. The trees are planted in organized manner. This is an oil palm state in Malaysia, and you can see that the tree looks quite similar to a coconut tree. It's very similar to a coconut tree. It's got a straight trunk and it has got fronds. It doesn't have branches. What we have here are called fronds, and each of these trees produces what we call the fresh fruit bunches. These are bunches to which these smaller fruits are attached, and the fruit itself, when you cut across it, as shown here, you get a cross section of the fruit. The outer part is the fleshy part, which is called the mesocarp, and the inside here you've got the kernel. And if you actually remove the mesocarp completely, this is how the kernel looks like. So taking a closer look at the fruit, a cross section of the fruit, as I mentioned, we have got the kernel here in the center, or rather you can also call it the seed. And surrounding the kernel is the shell, and outside the shell is the mesocarp. Okay, this is the oil palm fruit. So the oil palm is interesting because from one single fruit, you actually get two different oils. Two different oils. From the mesocarp, you get the palm oil, and from the kernel or the seed, you get the palm kernel oil. So these two oils, although they originate from the same crop or same plant, same tree, they have got different applications, and we'll discuss this later. I'd like to now look at the what we call the components of the palm oil industry. So this is the plantation. The plantation produces the fruits, which we call the FFB, the fresh fruit bunches. The fruits are milled or sent to the mill where they are processed to yield the crude palm oil and the kernels. The crude palm oil is then sent to a refinery where it is refined or purified to get refined oil and also a byproduct called palm fatty acid distillate. Similarly, the kernels that are produced in the mill, they are sent to a kernel crushing facility where the crushing facility extracts the main product, the crude palm kernel oil. And crude palm kernel oil itself also undergoes a refining process to be a refined palm kernel oil. So essentially this is the process. So crude palm kernel oil undergoes several steps, including degumming, bleaching, deacidification, and deodorization to finally yield the refined rich deodorized palm oil, after which this palm oil is fractionated into a liquid fraction and a solid fraction. The same thing happens to the palm kernel oil. The palm kernel oil again is fractionated into the liquid palm kernel olein and the solid palm kernel stearin. This is a flow chart which shows the different type of products that can be obtained by downstream processing or further processing of both palm oil and palm kernel oil. The boxes in green actually represent palm kernel oil and the ones in yellow are palm oil. But what I would like to mention to you is further processing or downstream processing of both palm kernel oil and palm oil yields different fractions and different products of palm that can be used in various food applications. In fact, some 80 to 85% of the palm oil produced worldwide actually goes into food. The reason that so much palm oil goes into food is because it is very versatile. It has got high stability, especially at very high temperatures, and therefore is very suitable for frying. Palm oil for foods has got a very strong advantage because it is free of trans fatty acids. Palm oil is also sustainably produced. We have got certification in Malaysia called the Malaysian Sustainable Palm Oil, which assures that palm oil is sustainably produced, and it's very competitively priced. So what are the food applications of palm oil? Well, it is very commonly used in household cooking oil. We have got industrial frying oils or fats from palm oil. It is used for making margarines and shortenings, primarily products that are used in the bakery industry. Then you've got vegetable ghee or vanaspati. We have got confectionery fats and frozen desserts. In fact, India is one of the major users of palm oil. More than 40 to 45% of India's consumption is palm oil industry. Now, I'd like to move on to what is the main focus of today's webinar, that is the non-food applications of oil palm products. So when we talk about non-food applications, there are three major areas which I would like to focus today on. One is the use of oil palm products in animal feed. The second is the use of oil palm products for the production of oleochemicals. And the third is oil palm products as a source of renewable energy. So here we have got some different types of oil palm products. You remember that when I showed you the slide on the plantation, I mentioned about the oil palm fronds. These are basically the so-called leaves from the oil palm. They are very high in fiber, and they are actually a byproduct of the oil palm plantation. And this, because of the high fiber content, of 45% crude fiber, oil palm fronds are very suitable for formulation of ruminant feed components. Ruminants are basically animals that, say, for example, like dairy cattle, you call them ruminants. Then you have got a byproduct from the oil palm milling. Here, this is the palm kernel cake or palm kernel, you can call it a palm kernel meal actually. This palm kernel meal is actually about 18 or 12 to 18% crude protein, but its main content is fiber, and it comes in as a filler in the formulation of animal feed, particularly for ruminant and even for poultry, although its use in poultry feed is somewhat limited. Then we have got the byproduct from the refining process. This is basically the palm fatty acid distillate. Since this component is rich in fatty acids, it is high in energy, and therefore it is used as a substitute for fat in the formulations for ruminant and poultry, as well as even for aqua feed. So these different oil palm components, which are actually byproducts of different stages of the production of palm oil, they are used in different types of animal feed.
Dr. Nagendran, can I interrupt?
Yes.
If you could make it full screen so that just next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, now we are talking now about oil-based chemicals. Now we've got petrochemicals, which are originating from petroleum, and many of you are aware of this. But what are oleochemicals? Oleochemicals are chemicals that actually obtain from vegetable oils or animal fats. The choice of what fat or oil you use would actually depend on the availability and cost. The health concerns, for example, there's been a shift from the use of tallow for many oleochemical products because one is the health concern because of the health scare that came up during the mad cow disease many years ago. Then their cultural practices, certain animal fats are taboos for certain people and certain groups of religion. So it is always a better choice to use vegetable oils in place of animal fats because you avoid all these controversies. The advantages of a plant-based raw material, well, as they are plant-based, they are renewable, and there are also multiple sources of these raw materials, and they are also more versatile. Okay. Oleochemicals are basically products that are obtained when you break up the oil molecule. What we have here is on the left side of the screen is a triglyceride. So what this is a glycerol molecule to which different fatty acids are attached. So by breaking up this molecule, you actually get a glycerin and also free fatty acids. So the free fatty acids are what we call the basic building blocks of the oleochemicals. So from the breaking this up, you actually get glycerols, you get the fatty acids, and by various processing of the fatty acids, you get fatty alcohols, methyl esters. Then using these basic oleochemicals, different derivative process can be used to obtain what we call oleochemical derivatives. And these yield surfactants, epoxidized compounds, polyols, and special esters. And we can also get what we call soap noodles by breaking up this triglyceride by reacting with an alkali, and you get what you call soap noodles. So these are basic oleochemicals. So what are oleochemicals used for? One of their major use is for grease and lubricants. Oleochemicals are used in surfactants and detergents. They are used in cosmetic and personal care products. We have got polymers. We've got specialty chemicals and agrochemicals. These can be obtained from oleochemicals. The next area for use for palm-based products are in the renewable energy sector. Here, I'm just like to focus on one is biodiesel, which basically is a methyl ester reacting an oil with methyl alcohol under certain conditions in the presence of catalyst produces methyl esters and glycerol. And this methyl esters is what are commonly called biodiesel. Then we have got from the biomass itself, we can actually get energy, and this is an oil palm biomass briquette, which can be burned to yield energy. In addition to this, we have got what we call second generation biofuels from the biomass, where the use of thermochemical conversion using heat in the absence of oxygen produces different types of second generation biofuels. Then you could also convert biomass into biochemical energy by a biological process, say, for example, by using microbial fermentation, and you get products like bioethanol. So this is another use for oil palm biomass. Now, in conclusion, what I'd like to mention to you is that palm oil is a major oil that's produced on a global basis. The oil has got very high productivity, and because of this high productivity, it is available in abundance and at competitive cost. The oil is very versatile. It has got numerous uses. The main use, approximately 80 to 85%, is used in the food sector, whereas a significant amount is also used in non-food sector. But there is also additional use from the oil palm biomass in the non-food sector. The major uses are basically in animal feed, oleochemicals, and renewable energy. So with that, thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. The floor is open for Q&A. You can go ahead and ask questions.
I have a question, Dr. Nagendra.
Sure.
So
Yes, please.
what percentage is going for non-food kind of applications?
Okay, now approximately as a rule of thumb, something like 80 to 85% actually goes into food use. Okay, only about 20 or 15 to 20% goes into non-food use. And much of these non-food uses are actually from the byproducts, mainly the palm fatty acid and the palm kernel fatty acid, and to some extent the biomass that comes from the oil palm plantation. So primarily because it's an edible oil and there is a shortage or deficiency of edible oils, most of the palm oil produced actually goes into food use. In fact, even a significant amount of palm kernel oil also goes into food use, especially the palm kernel stearin. Okay, whereas most of the palm kernel oil goes into the oleochemical industry because it is a source of lauric acid, lauric and myristic fats. So,
and which countries are making biodiesel? Or because if I'm not wrong, India has banned using edible oil for making any biodiesel, right? Like used cooking
Okay.
oil is, but not
Yes.
because we are
Now,
edible oil, I think deficient. So if I'm not
yes.
mistaken.
Okay. There has been sort of there's always this question of debate about the food versus fuel. It has been there for a long time. Generally, at the moment now, because of the there's actually a shortage of deficiency of edible oils, and the price of edible oils are actually quite high. So the production of biodiesel is basically what we call depends on the price parity between crude oil and that of the different edible oils. So much of the biodiesel is still produced in Europe. They use mostly rapeseed oil, and to some extent, sometimes soybean oil is used. But the primary raw material for the use of biodiesel, the production biodiesel remains like things like used cooking oil, even the palm fatty acid distillate. After splitting, it can be used for the biodiesel industry. Basically, you do the methylation and you get a methyl ester. Okay, so yeah, so that is, and there are, of course, I suppose, as you mentioned, perhaps there are some countries which have got certain policies to ensure that there's adequate supply of edible oil. And I'm not sure whether India has banned biodiesel completely, but there are companies in India which actually sourcing used cooking oil and things like palm acid oil, palm fatty acid distillate for the biodiesel industry.
And I recently read somewhere that soya acid oil is being used to extract vitamin E.
Yes,
So
that's
something can
also
be done
possible.
from palm also, palm acid oil.
Sorry?
Something similar can be done from palm or palm acid oil or
Yes,
palm
you
oil.
can. You can. The basic raw material would be the fatty acid. So as long as your raw material contains fatty acid, and there's I think about 80%, 85% fatty acid in fatty acid distillate or even palm acid oil, you can get the raw material and then you react it with the methyl ester. You convert the fatty acids into fatty acid methyl esters. So this is basically what we call biodiesel. In fact, chemically, biodiesel is quite different from petroleum diesel. Petroleum diesel is basically a hydrocarbon, whereas biodiesel actually contains an oxygen molecule in the structure. So it's a methyl ester. But they are very similar when it comes to combustion performance. Palm acid oil, yes. Strictly speaking, from the actual definition, palm acid oil is obtained when you have chemical refining of palm oil. Uh, Palm fatty acid is obtained when you have physical refining. Sometimes we also get certain amount of acid oil type products from the milling process. Though these two actually contain significant amount of fatty acid, and they can also be used for the production biodiesel.
Okay. No, but I was asking about vitamin E
Okay.
from acid oil.
Vitamin E, yes. You see, what happens is when they do the refining, of palm oil, crude palm oil contains about approximately 700 to 1,000 parts per million of tocopherols and tocotrienols collectively, and a portion of this, perhaps about 30% of the uh, vitamin E present in crude palm oil partitions into the fatty acid distillate. Now, in terms of mass, if you were to, roughly, there is about 5% content of free fatty acid in crude palm oil. So when you refine, say, on a ballpark figure, if you were to refine 100 tons of crude palm oil, in theory, you'll get 95 tons of refined palm oil and about 5 tons of palm fatty acid distillate. But in terms of content, 30% of the 100 of the 1000 parts per million actually partitions in the fatty acid. So when you look at it, it's the fatty acid, palm fatty acid distillate is actually a concentrate, contains a concentrate of vitamin E. And indeed, it is used as a raw material for the extraction of vitamin E. So there are processes. You can obtain vitamin E either from crude palm oil or from the palm fatty acid distillate. It's a matter of which process one chooses.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is a question in chat box. I guess even I
Okay.
can answer, but I would let you. Why is palm oil not listed as an ingredient on most products?
Why is palm oil not listed as an ingredient on most products? Well, if you were to pick up a consumer product, it does list it. I am a bit surprised that it's not listed. You see, sometimes some manufacturers, they list it as a vegetable oil because they change the formulation according to the availability and the price. So what they do is they put vegetable oil, but they may use a mixture of palm oil or soybean oil or even some other oil to produce their margarine. Sometimes they may use a certain amount of palm stearin for solid fats. So it's a mixture of the product of the oils, and they do not actually declare it on the product label. But if you look at, say, for example, say cooking oil, it's very clearly stated that's RBD palm oil.
Correct. So in fact, FSSAI allows you to say vegetable oil. I guess that's
Yes.
the answer. So yes, it may not be listed as a palm oil, but definitely it will be listed as a vegetable oil or vegetable fat or like some source of where it might be coming from palm.
Yes.
May I ask a question, please?
Yeah, sure.
I'm calling from Indore, sir. Dr. Pooja speaking from Madhya Pradesh, Indore. Sir, I wanted to know that why it is not cultivated in India and why the prices are so less uh, for palm oil. That is the cheapest one, I think.
Well, now, one reason for the relatively, I would say, competitive price is because of the production. You see, it takes just for 1 hectare produces about three and a half to 4 tons compared to soybean oil. 1 hectare you get less than half a ton. So you look at the productivity factor. One. Second thing is in terms of price. It's always a market forces that play. In fact, palm oil, of course, when you look at the international price, it is approximately something like about currently is about almost say per ton on CIF basis in Mumbai it's about 100 to 120 US dollars less than soybean oil. Of course, the soybean oil that India imports comes from halfway across the world, from basically from Argentina. Okay, your sunflower oil comes from Ukraine, whereas palm comes from Malaysia, which is hardly a week's journey away from India. So you've got the freight cost, much less freight cost there, that contributes to a lower landed cost. That's one. Oil palm is actually cultivated in India. Currently, you have got something like 3 lakh hectares of oil palm plantations in India, mainly in Telangana, in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, also in the northeastern states. In terms of production, India produces about 2 lakh tons, 2 lakh tons, 2 lakh tons, that's about 200,000 tons of palm oil per year. The limitations for oil palm cultivation is, you see, the oil palm, the crop originated from the jungles of West Africa, the equatorial jungles of West Africa. It was brought to Southeast Asia, primarily to Malaysia and Indonesia, by the British and also by the Dutch. And they started planting oil palm in Malaysia and Indonesia almost more than 100 years ago. The oil palm actually grows best about 10 degrees north and 10 degrees south of the equator because it needs plenty of rain. In India, you have a limitation because you depend a lot on the monsoon rains, and there is insufficient rain to support the oil palm crop. In fact, where it is being planted, especially in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, they use irrigation, or probably in the northeast you get more rain, so that's probably suitable. But then again, the terrain or the shape of the land also comes in. Oil palm is not very well suited for hilly terrain, so there are a lot of limitations. The land type, the terrain, the rainfall, all these factors come in, and sometimes you do get the oil palm tree, but because of what we call drought, prolonged drought, you actually don't get fruits. You don't get fruits, so you don't get oil at the end of the day. So these are some of the challenges in planting oil palm outside the equatorial zone.
So, Dr. Nagendran, with your permission, if I can add, um, basically,
Yes.
palm oil is coming from the fruit, whereas everything else that
Yes.
we are talking about is from the oil seeds. So because now if you visualize a fruit versus a seed, you'll realize that the yield that you're going to get is much lower, and that's what if in the photos also that I think Dr. Nagendran showed, that those fruits are pretty huge, and that's why I guess the yield of oil is much, I think, what, 4 or 5 times more per hectare, you said, compared to the oil seeds. And that's precisely, I'm saying, the reason for probably oil prices of palm oil being lower compared to the likes of groundnut or even sesame or sunflower, which are basically coming from the oil seeds. Am I right, Dr. Nagendra, in saying that?
Yes, precisely.
And the oil coming from the nut is basically the palm oil, palm kernel oil, correct?
Yes, the palm kernel oil. Now from the nut, you see the palm kernel oil is actually chemically, the palm kernel oil is very similar to coconut oil. Now, I also touch on this because I see a question here which says where on the chat box, it says where it stands in terms of healthy oil comparing to other oils. Now, basically, oils are made up of triglycerides, as I mentioned earlier. I showed you the structure of triglyceride. You've got a glycerol to which fatty acids are attached. Now, different fatty acids form an oil. In fact, they are and the fatty acids differ in terms of chain length and also the type of bonds present. Chain lengths may be vary depending on the number of carbon atoms from 4 to typically up to about 22, 24 carbons. And there may be either no double bonds, in which you call it a saturated fatty acid, one double bond in the chain, monounsaturated, and more than 1, 2 or more, call it polyunsaturated. So that actually determines the fatty acid structure, either saturated, monounsaturated, or polyunsaturated, and the chain length. So in the case of palm kernel oil, the predominant fatty acids are those which have got 12 carbons and 14 carbons. So these are what we call the lauric acids and the myristic acids. And this is very similar to coconut oil. And coconut oil and palm kernel oil also contain a significant amount of what we call the medium chain triglycerides. That is the carbon atoms about 4 to 6, that number in the chain. For most of the other vegetable oils, palm oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, and groundnut oil and all this, they actually contain longer chain fatty acids. So normally carbon 16 and above, typically carbon 16 and carbon 18. So when we talk about carbon chain and the degree of unsaturation, this is where this discussion about health comes in. For a long time, maybe in fact since the 1950s, there had been sort of hypothesis to say that saturated fatty acids were bad, unsaturated fatty acids were good. And this was a very simple or simplistic way of looking at fats and oils and classifying fats and oils as good fats and bad fats. The recent trend has shown that there has been much misrepresentation of the early data that was presented, in fact, from the 1950s and 60s to paint saturated fatty acids as bad and unsaturated fatty acids as good. And this is where it is changing. So when you look at palm oil, actually palm oil contains what we call a mix, a balance of saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. Approximately 50% is saturated and 50% is unsaturated. And this is an advantage because when you talk about solid fats, which you are consuming for the industry, you do not need to hydrogenate palm oil. Palm actually gives you a trans-free alternative. For example, if you were to use soybean oil to make vanaspati, you have to hydrogenate it. But that is because you have to convert a liquid oil into a solid fat, and you do that by adding hydrogen to the structure. That need not be done for palm. So palm is naturally semi-solid. The palmitic acid in palm and the stearic acid in palm give that structural need of solid fat. So you can use it without hydrogenation. And that's the biggest advantage of palm. And again, palm also contains approximately 40% of monounsaturated fatty acid, folic acid, C18-1. So there is sufficient unsaturation in palm to prevent unnecessary health risks. And bear in mind that one consumes a mixture of oils. So you actually get a mixture of fatty acids. You also consume invisible fats in your diet as well as visible fats. So it's all a mixture of fats that you take. So there is no concern health aspect of palm, but that's a totally long lecture on that. So we probably could take up that at some other time. Okay. So Nilesh, can I go on to the next question here, which says the procedure for importing? Yes. Typically, now there are different types of palm products that are actually exported to India. The major is palm oil, which is currently crude palm oil. For importing crude palm oil, you don't need an import license. But if you want to import a refined palm oil, you have to obtain what we call an import license or import-export certificate from the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, DGFT. So you've got to go to their website. There are conditions to fulfill, and you have got to apply for a license. At the same time, you have got to find a supplier in Malaysia or in other countries, and you need to get in touch with them, discuss your business arrangements, draw up a contract, make the necessary payments, and then you can import the oil. Okay. There's also a question, do you do the packaging? Yes, you can import it as a finished product, in which case it will be packed into jerry cans or into ISO tanks, shipped on containers. But if you're importing large volumes, maybe, say 5,000 tons, not 5 tons, 5,000 tons and above, then you probably need to import it in bulk carriers. So, in time.
I think he has shared his email address, so you can always reach out to him offline.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Maybe one last question, or because Dr. Nagendran is in Malaysia, so I think it's 9:30 there.
Yeah, it is 9:30.
So we would let him
only
go.
Only if not any question, it's just only one question. Now this MCPD and G is creating a lot of noise actually, mostly in palm products.
Okay.
So,
yeah, we have got several mitigation measures to actually reduce it. So we have got basically it's a process-driven contaminant. So by modifying your process, you can actually bring it down to the levels that the EU has set. So it's actually not really an issue. Basically, it's modifying the process. For example, you can do washing of the crude palm oil before it is refined, using lower deodorization temperatures, using certain processing technologies, you can actually control that. So it's actually, noise is there, but it's actually not a real concern in that sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Diksha, over to you. You can raise a vote of thanks.
Yes. I would like to propose vote of thanks. Sincerely thanks to Mr. Nagendran for your valuable time and a very enlightening session. I would like to thank our support partners, AFST Mumbai chapter, Entra-Auto and NetProfam, and thank you all the participants for attending today's webinar. I declare the session has ended. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Nagendran.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to
Thanks.
everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night.